Hey guys, what's up, fam? Happy Monday. Welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of The Polygamist Daughter. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into this. Before I forget, our night, is it 2189? I don't remember the number, but you know who you are. Thank you so much for donating to this book. I appreciate you. You don't have to do it. And I know I told you thank you before, but I just want to make sure that I'm saying it on camera because I am grateful. All right, y'all. Y'all ready? Let's go. Chapter 24. After Mom returned to Denver without either Marilyn or me, life settled into a nice routine of school, work, homework, and taking care of Mark and Lillian's kids. I love this. A lot of you all have said it in the comment section. It's nice to read something where it's not just a bunch of tragedy. And I'm enjoying this, even though I'm still anticipating that something may happen. I'm enjoying just watching her be a kid. For the first time in my life, I felt normal. I could hardly believe the difference as I walked into Spring Branch Church of God Academy each weekday. Following the incident with Mom, all the teachers knew my story, but they didn't treat me as odd because of it. Instead, they treated me with kindness and intentional outpouring of thoughtfulness and care from the first moment. This is what it's supposed to be. When you tell me that you're trying to do something as a Christian, I expect you to lead from love. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that. So hearing that this is what she experienced the love instead of the judgment, that's beautiful. I'd never been on the receiving end of such love. Wow. Their eyes showed they cared, and their words were understanding and compassionate. The same was true of my fellow students. They made me feel welcome at school and invited me into their circle of friends. The small school had fewer than 100 students in K through 12, so we all got to know each other well. Plus, the families all attended the same tiny church of God, a requirement for having a student enrolled in the school. In this tight-knit community, everybody knew everybody, but more important, we had each other's backs. I became fast friends with siblings Madeline and Alexis Campbell, as well as Michelle Carpus and David, I know I'm going to say this right, Hyen, Heyen. I'm not sure if I pronounced that wrong, but Heyen. My new girlfriends invited me to go with them to the youth retreat planned for Thanksgiving weekend, just a few weeks away. As Lillian drove us home from the appliance store that evening, I began to think through how to ask her if I could go to the retreat. I just needed to find the right moment. Even though my free time was limited because of school and work, I still longed to join my new friends. Lillian looked more fatigued than usual as she tried to finish dinner and deal with the babies. After dinner, I took the kids off her hands, put them in a bath, which always settled them and helped get them ready for bed. I knew it was now or never to make my request. Lillian was in the living room, where a laundry basket full of clean clothes waited for me. As I picked a shirt out of the basket and began folding it, I seized the opportunity. My heart was beating fast as I tried to find the words to ask Lillian about the retreat, knowing it would be a sacrifice on her part if she agreed. I like my new school a lot. The teachers and kids are really nice to me. Lillian looked at me. I'm so glad to hear that. Mark and I both think it will be a good situation for you. I do too. I paused and cleared my throat, which had suddenly gone dry. Can I talk to you about something? Sure. What's going on? Well, there's a youth retreat coming up. I heard about that at church on Sunday, she said. I grabbed a pair of jeans and quickly folded them. I'd I'd kind of like to go. I was afraid to see Lillian's expression, so I averted my eyes and began to sort the socks. My head and heart willed Lillian to say yes, or at least say she'd think about it and talk to Mark. I viewed the long weekend away as an opportunity to get away from the endless work at the store and at home with all the children. I desperately needed a break, but I also knew this would be a privilege. When Lillian didn't say anything, I glanced up. A faint smile was tugging at the corners of her mouth. I think that would be okay. Do you have any more information about it? I told Lillian how much the retreat cost, but quickly added, I don't have the full amount right now, but if you would loan me the money, I'll pay it back with my earnings. Let me talk to Mark, and I'll let you know one way or the other. The next morning at breakfast, I tried to be as helpful as possible again, hoping my efforts might be worthy of some time off. Lillian pulled me into the laundry room. Oh, I hope this works. She didn't say that. I'm saying that. Anna, Mark and I talked about it, and we are not only going to give you permission to go, but we're going to pay your way. Y'all, I'm such a sucker. I feel myself getting teary-eyed. I think it's because she's been through so much. And for the first time in her life, she's getting to be a kid that has additional responsibilities, more than maybe some of us may have had, or, I don't know, because I had a lot of responsibility. I'm just saying, maybe more than some of us had growing up. But here she is, and this is big. Oh, I love them for her. Whew. I stared at her, my mouth open, until one of the kids hollered from the dining room. Thank you so much, Lillian. This means so much to me. I don't even know how to thank you. I hugged her and held on. Lillian broke away when we heard another squeal. I hope you have fun with your new friends. We met at the church right after Thanksgiving dinner, and after we loaded our luggage and sleeping bags into the back of the church's old bus, all of us climbed aboard and found our seats. I waved goodbye to Lillian and the kids through the window, then settled in for the hour-long ride to J Bar J Ranch in Sealy, Texas. En route, I learned many of the Christian camp songs popular in the 80s, which we sang at the top of our lungs. Before I knew it, we had arrived. The ranch sprawled over several acres, and even though the grass was brown and many of the trees had shed their leaves, I relished the opportunity to spend a few days outside the city. Some of my most fondest memories are going camping with friends. I loved camping. I love putting up the tents. I love sleeping in the sleeping bags. I didn't really like the accommodations as far as the shower and the bathroom went, but I loved camping. So hearing this, I'm thinking about those memories, and I hope she has a good experience. During the day, we played kickball, tetherball, waffle ball, and tag for hours, then gathered in the chapel in the evening to sing and listen to the youth pastor's sermon. I got to know my new friends better in the carefree, lighthearted environment. I especially liked the camp food, particularly that there was plenty of it. Though I hadn't envisioned anything other than a break from the mountain of work back at home, God had something different in mind for me. On Sunday night, after Pastor James finished his sermon, he stood at the front of the small chapel with arms extended and said softly, "Is the Lord calling you tonight?" He is, if you don't already have a relationship with him. So ask yourself, do I know about Jesus, or do I know Jesus himself? As the pianist played quietly in the background, I felt something pressing on my chest, as though someone had placed a sack of potatoes on it. My heart beat faster, and I gasped for breath. Pastor James continued, "In just a moment, we're going to dismiss you for the evening. But if you feel God calling you, if you want to pray, just stay in your seat. Let everyone else leave. Don't worry about what they're doing. You have an appointment with Jesus tonight." All around me, kids started getting up silently and walking out of the chapel, but I stayed. I don't think I could have willed my feet to move even if I wanted to. Honestly, I didn't fully understand what I was doing, but a spectrum of emotions, peace, hope, joy, it washed over me. For the first time ever, I felt settled and accepted for who I was. I wanted in on this amazing life that I could see everyone there had. I certainly didn't understand everything, but I knew enough to know that these people had something real, something special. The love in their lives was evident to me. How they lived out their faith was palpable. So when Pastor James offered me the opportunity to be a part of it, I wanted to accept. Eventually, only the two of us remained. Pastor James walked over to me, turned a chair around, and sat down in front of me. Anna. His voice was filled with compassion. I lifted my head to look at him. He greeted me with a wide smile. Would you like to invite Jesus into your heart? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He asked gently, are you comfortable praying out loud? My voice was barely above a whisper. No. That's fine, no problem. You can pray silently. Just repeat after me, okay? I nodded again. Pastor James took my hands in his and began to pray. And when he paused, I repeated the words in my mind. Dear God, I believe that Jesus died on the cross to pay the penalty for my sin. Thank you for loving me so much that you have forgiven me and offered me eternal life. Amen. I clutched his hands as my heart beat wildly in my chest. I meant every word I prayed that day. I felt conspicuous as I walked out of the chapel and joined my friends in the game room. I thought all eyes would be on me as I walked in, but the other kids pulled me into the banter and fun as though nothing unusual had happened. The smile on my face told the whole story. I was loved and accepted by God, and I was bursting inside with the wonderfulness of it all. When I got back home, I felt different, renewed, and full of hope. I knew I had a lot to learn about the Bible and my relationship with Jesus, but I understood that I was saved. If I died, I would go to heaven, and that assurance gave me security and peace. Still, I struggled with actually saying the name Jesus. His name had been spoken with such scorn and desertion in my family that whenever I did say it, even to myself, I had to fight off the negative thoughts and feelings, imagining my family's judgment. See, this is the aspect that I don't know about some of these cults, because for the longest time before reading these things, I thought that they felt, similarly about who Jesus was as Christians. But then I learned over time that that's not the case. So hearing that, I wonder exactly what was said to her when she was growing up. Although I shared most of what happened during the treat with Lillian and Mark, I didn't say anything about my conversion for fear that they might enroll me in public school. Wow. I knew they hadn't sent me to Christian school to become a Christian. I was there because the culture there would keep me safe from the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, so prevalent in the public schools. I knew Mark and Lillian were being exposed to the gospel themselves. In order for me to go to the academy, my parents had to attend at least one church service a week. So they dutifully got up on Sunday mornings and took the entire family to church. They began serving the church before they became believers. Yeah, I was going to say, at some point, I wonder if this is going to have an effect on them as well. Mark, an incredible musician, sometimes played piano during the worship service, and Lillian would sing with him. Mark also volunteered to drive for the bus ministry. Their involvement gave me a sense of relief. I'm not entirely sure how and when their conversions occurred, but one Sunday night at church, during testimony time, they each stood up and shared that they had come to trust Jesus and gave glory to the Lord. I felt even more relieved. I had purposely chosen to let them come to know God in their own way and in their own time. After I had made my decision to follow Jesus, I was a quiet believer at home. But at church and youth group, I spoke freely about my faith and love for Jesus. Once I heard Mark and Lillian testify, I told them what had happened to me on that weekend retreat and felt free to talk about spiritual things at home too. Mark and Lillian still had the daily pressures of juggling work, school, and kids, and we always feared repercussions from Dan Jordan or my mom. But the atmosphere in their home eventually began to change. The undercurrent of stress and fear gradually abated for me. After years of being Lillian's right-hand girl who worked hard for her approval and made sure my constant efforts secured my place in her home, I now realized I had become indispensable to her and Mark. Mm. In the spring of 1983, at the age of 14, I started going with David. I fell hard for his sweet smile and somewhat shy personality. My mind quickly turned to thoughts of marriage after all. Most of the females in my culture I'd grown up in were married by age 15. I began to wonder what it would be like to marry David and, more important, to be his only wife. Whenever I hear these things, I go back to me as a teenager, and I do not remember at that young age thinking about marriage. I do remember my boyfriend, and couldn't nobody tell me anything about my boyfriend, which is funny because we parted ways when I had to move from New York to Virginia, and then we got back together later in life when I was done with my ex. So it's funny how, things work out. But when I hear this, that's what I think about. Like, when you were 14, were y'all thinking about marriage? Because that was the furthest thing from my mind. Though it was a foreign concept from what I'd grown up with, and far outside the realm of my reality, I like to imagine myself being special to someone instead of just one of many wives. Yeah. I let myself fantasize about a monogamous marriage like Mark and Lillian had, or Jim and Kathleen, who had eloped when they couldn't get permission from my mother and leaders within the cult to marry. Good for them. I wanted the kind of love that they shared. Chapter 25. The months moved by at an accelerated pace, perhaps because home, school, and work were comfortable places for me, or perhaps it was because I had escaped the oppression of the cult. Now I got to make some decisions for myself, and my opinion mattered. When I first moved in with Mark and Lillian, they had just welcomed their fifth child, Hannah, into their family. I enjoyed tending her and became a second pair of hands and eyes when Lillian needed to get things done, which was all the time. My older sister rarely lounged around. She busied herself constantly accomplishing tasks on her to-do list or making sure others did. I developed my strong work ethic from being around her, watching her check off items as she completed them. I certainly didn't have a task-oriented personality. Instead, I enjoyed being around people. Still, my chameleon-like nature allowed me to blend in with those around me, so I mimicked Lillian when necessary to garner her acceptance and praise. I didn't like watching TV when she was around because we could never just sit and watch an entire TV show. Lillian used commercial breaks to get all of us kids to tidy up the living room or fold and put away the never-ending loads of laundry. I felt compelled to help, though I would have preferred to stay planted on the comfortable couch doing nothing but watching Little House on the Prairie, the only show Lillian approved of us watching. I used to love Little House on the Prairie too, because that was one of the ones that my mom let me watch too. But with two adults, one teenager, me, and after baby Calvin came along, six younger children, chores beckon constantly. See, this is the part that I struggle with, right? They're doing great. I get it. At what point do we kind of pull back a little bit on these babies? At what point do we do the rhythm method, or is this not, they don't believe in birth control still? Because I know there are some people who practice Christianity that don't believe in birth control. But like, what are we doing here? Because we keep on having all these babies, and yes, she's getting to experience life more, but she's still having to have additional responsibilities because you have all these kids. I quickly came to understand and embrace the phrase, no rest for the weary, as it characterized my existence. The tenuous nature of my situation plagued me. I felt tremendous self-imposed pressure to graduate from high school as quickly as possible. Given the rapidly changing culture I lived in, I never knew if the proverbial rug might get yanked from underneath me, forcing me to live elsewhere. Someplace where I wouldn't have it so good. Someplace I wouldn't be allowed to attend private Christian school. Someplace I'd have to work longer hours for far fewer dollars. Someplace I wouldn't feel accepted, nurtured, and loved. I constantly pondered what life might look like anywhere other than with Mark and Lillian. I never felt secure. I did everything they asked me to do without complaining, without exhibiting a single negative attitude. Mark and Lillian didn't tolerate bad attitudes in their house, no matter the reason or excuse for them. Lillian was the one who would say something to me if I didn't comply with her expectations. Lillian took this so far as to question every expression on my face that wasn't pleasant. Oh, that would annoy me. And I would get in a lot of trouble because I make some faces. Trust me, I used to get in trouble all the time for my facial expressions. Even when I didn't think I was doing something, I was making a face. So I'm hearing this, I'm like, okay, like let her live. What's wrong? Lillian would ask me regularly. Even if something was wrong, I denied it. Nothing. We repeated this conversation numerous times while I lived with them because Lillian did not tolerate ingratitude in anyone, least of all, someone she was helping. Eventually, I learned to keep a pleasant expression on my face, no matter how I felt inside. Doing so made life easier. It meant I didn't have to answer uncomfortable questions about negative feelings I might have, some of which I couldn't understand myself, let alone explain to someone else. I accepted that Lillian had the right to require anything she wanted of me because it was her home. That is true. It is her home. It's just difficult sometimes when you hear that, seeing all that she's been through. When I first came to their house, I slept in the room just off of the dining room with Lillian's girls, which afforded me little peace and quiet. I dressed in the main bathroom that we all shared, which meant I had to carry everything back and forth. During the time I was with them, some of my siblings who were teenagers too came to live with us, but most of them left when they couldn't adjust to Mark and Lillian's high standards. Lillian strictly enforced the rules, but my other siblings found ways to get around them and eventually left or were asked to leave. Wow. Marilyn was one of them, eventually followed by Lillian's full siblings, Pablo and Delia. I told the line without wavering. From the beginning, Lillian told me that anytime I wanted to go back to Denver, they would buy me a plane ticket. I always had the option of going back to live with my mom. That ticket back to Denver became a double-edged sword of sorts, as they used it as a veiled threat to keep me from breaking their rules. Now that part I don't like. The fear of messing up badly enough to be sent back would haunt me for years. I didn't know Lillian's brother Isaac before he came to live with us. He was bipolar, so he would be depressed for a period of time, followed by manic highs. I got used to his mental instability and wasn't afraid. He just seemed odd to me. He helped me around the house and ate meals with the rest of the family, except when he was experiencing depression. At one point, Lillian and Mark decided to send Isaac to an inpatient facility for treatment. I don't recall how long he was gone, but when he returned home, he seemed okay for a while, and then tragedy struck. Oh no! First of all, I hope they don't mess me up for the ice cream truck in the background playing the music. But what can I do? It's a nice day outside. Second of all, this next part is why I said, oh no. I hope I remember to put a little trigger warning up here. Isaac put a gun to his temple and pulled the trigger, committing suicide in his room. Because the room wasn't in the main house, but rather an add-on at the back of the garage next to the washer, dryer, and utility sink, no one knew what had happened until Mark and Lillian's 13-year-old son Brandon found him. Oh no. We were all shocked, but Lillian took Isaac's death particularly hard. I'm sure she felt responsible for him. A few weeks later, Mark and Lillian asked me if I wanted to move into Isaac's old room. Since I was the oldest, it made sense that I would be the one to move. It would give me more privacy, and Lillian would get to have the main part of the house for herself and her family. So I agreed. Mark helped me move my limited belongings into the space. At first, it was weird to be there, but I soon found it to be a reprieve from the noise and activity in the house. I still had to go back and forth to the bathroom, which was even farther now, but that wasn't a problem. To get from my new room to the house, I had to walk through the laundry room, then the garage, then the business office space, which led to the kitchen. Each time I made this trek, I would pause before opening the door that led from the garage to the office in order to stretch my face muscles into a contrived smile much wider than my normal smile. Oh, just so that she can look pleasant. I don't like that she's having to do that. Like, ugh. Once that was done, my face would then relax into a pleasant looking expression. Since I never knew from day to day, sometimes even hour to hour, what frame of mind Lillian would be in, I found that this preparation kept her questions to a minimum. Masking my true feelings unless they were positive became a way of life for me. Positivity became my self-preservation as I placated my sister. It seemed to me that Lillian couldn't help herself. She faced emotional issues, no doubt, triggered by the fact that she was born into a family that lacked the guidance and discipline, love and protection that a monogamous marriage would have provided. Many of us left in the wake of Ervil LeBaron's influence, suffered emotional distress as a result. Yeah, y'all, they went through a lot. They went through a lot, and I don't think a lot of them ever were able to get the proper help that they deserved, because there was a lot of things that she, look at her saying that, the first time she experienced this level of love was from teachers at her school. That says a lot. I will always have a special place in my heart for educators, because you guys really touch people. Those of you who are educators, shouts out to you guys, because whether or not you hear this often enough or not, you guys save lives. And I know that because I've had my own experience with some of my teacher friends, as well as teachers that I had in school. And you guys matter. They don't give you enough money. Y'all matter. Given our upbringing, Lillian wouldn't entertain the thought of anyone having a bad day. On many occasions, Lillian struggled to hold it together, but she managed with Mark's help. He provided her with steady strength. To Lillian, life away from the chokehold of the cult needed to be appreciated and lived to the fullest. Sometimes her incredibly high standards had a negative effect on those around her, but she was motivated by love. She wanted those she cared for to rise to her perfectionist ideal for their own good. About a month after I moved into the garage bedroom, I heard a knock on my door late one Saturday night. When I opened the door, Mark was standing there, his face serious and weary. "Would you be able to help me get the children ready for the church in the morning?" "Of course, but what's wrong?" He cleared his throat and let his gaze drop to the floor. "Lillian and I got into a fight about, well, that's not important. Anyway, she left." What? What? Oh, she said the same thing. My heart ached for the two of them, but I couldn't help but wonder what a separation between them might mean for my future. "Of course I'll help." She checked into a hotel, hopefully just for the night. His breath caught in his throat, and he gave another little cough. "I'm hoping this will all blow over. That it's nothing permanent." "I hope so too." He gave me a weak smile and said goodnight. Lillian had not come home by morning, so I hurriedly dressed and fed the children before church. Though I didn't relish the circumstances, I got some satisfaction from knowing that Mark was aware he could count on me to be dependable and capable. Thank goodness Mark and Lillian worked out their differences. She came back to the house that afternoon. One of my regular responsibilities was doing the grocery shopping at Wynn Gardens grocery store across the 2-lane street. The manager and checkout clerks came to know me by name, and when I turned 16, the manager offered me a job. I begged Mark and Lillian to let me work there. I desperately wanted to have the experience of a normal job like several of my friends had. Despite my pleading, they wouldn't even consider it. I rarely expressed my displeasure with any of their decisions, including this one, but it was a severe disappointment for me. Yeah, they need her at the house. They need her to help around the house, to help Lillian, because she keeps having these kids, and they need her to help at the store, but it's unfortunate. Clearly, they needed me to help their household and business run smoothly. Each morning, I was instrumental in getting Lillian and Mark's kids ready for school. After school, I helped with whatever chores needed doing, or I worked for the appliance business, whatever they told me to do. I tried my best to be helpful, regardless of the task. I scrubbed the old tile floor in the kitchen using a bristle brush to remove dirt and grime from the grout, one line at a time. I ironed the kids' school uniforms after they'd been washed and dried. As much as I detested pressing crisp creases in the girls' pleated skirts, there was no getting around it. Each evening, I made and packed sack lunches for the kids who went to school. Initially, when Pablo, Marilyn, and Delia were living with us, I was making a lot of sandwiches. Marilyn, Delia, and I were on the volleyball team, and we had to show up for practice by 7 o'clock each morning. One night, oh boy, I forgot to make lunches ahead of time. So the next morning, I grabbed a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly, and a knife and took everything with me to school. At lunchtime, I stood at one of the cafeteria tables and made sandwiches for everyone in our family. From that embarrassing experience, I learned my lesson and never forgot to make lunches after that. Lillian enrolled me in driver's education class when I was 15, agreeing to pay my tuition if I would chauffeur the kids around for them once I got my license. Okay, so here's the thing. Like, she's having a better life than she would have if she were at home with her mother, yet she's still responsible for a lot. So she's still not really getting to experience the full, joys of being a carefree teen because she's older and she has to help out, which happens in a lot of larger families. Trust me, I've seen it happen, especially with, my parents and their, siblings, because they have a lot of siblings. But it's just, I'm listening to it, I'm like, wow. It's a lot of parentification going on. Not as bad as it would have been, but it's still a thing. I passed the class easily, and when I turned 16, I passed my driver's test easily too. The family celebrated my accomplishment at dinner. Anna, we're very proud of you. Mark raised his water glass and a mock toast. He glanced at Lillian, who smiled and nodded her head in agreement. He continued, so proud that we want to propose a deal. What kind of deal? I knew better than to let my excitement get the better of me. Since you'll be taking the kids to and from school and to their after school activities, we'll pay for gas and insurance, and you may drive the station wagon anytime you want. That doesn't sound like, I don't mean any harm, but that sounds like we'll pay for gas and insurance, but we want you to take the kids to and from school and to their activities. That sounds like the least you could do is pay for the gas and insurance. They're your kids. Okay, let me stay in my. Did I miss something here? Let me read it again. Since you'll be taking the kids to and from school and to their after school activities, we'll pay for gas and insurance, and you may drive the station wagon anytime you want. Okay, she can drive the station wagon anytime she wants. That's the deal. Lillian said, I swallowed hard to choke back tears of joy. Oh, I'm the ungrateful one because she's happy about it. Never mind. No one had ever given me such consideration in my life. Mark and Lillian were all but giving me the station wagon. More than ever before, I realized that they loved me, appreciated my efforts, and considered me a part of their family. I guess this is making me want to do a little bit of self-reflecting here, because I don't doubt that they love her. I do believe that they love her, but she's so grateful for the littlest of things. The gift in this is that she can drive the car from time to time when she wants to, and she's so happy about that. Okay, Ruth, you're teaching me here. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. Having a car meant I could drive myself to the youth activities at church. I craved that time with my friends, that time of worship and learning. To have the freedom to get myself there and back overwhelmed me. I stood and moved around the table to hug Lillian. I was so happy. Suddenly, it dawned on me why they had recently purchased a new Cadillac Seville, Seville, for themselves. I smiled at the forethought of their win-win proposal. In addition to paying my tuition at the Christian school, allowing me to live with them rent-free, and now letting me drive the station wagon, Mark and Lillian paid me $75 a week to help them run the appliance business and take care of their children. I wasn't given cash each week. Instead, I kept track of how much they owed me on a calendar hanging in my room. Whenever I needed money, I just asked them for it, explaining what I planned to spend it on. I tried time I tried to time my request when I knew it would be convenient for them to pay me, which meant asking soon after they made cash sales. After I amassed several $100s on account with them without spending anything, Lillian took me to the bank to open a savings account. I felt so grown up and empowered having a bank account with money in it. I love watching the balance grow every time I asked Lillian for money and depositing those funds, so much so that I rarely found anything I wanted enough to make a withdrawal. I have to give them credit for allowing her to have her own money. I made little comments about certain things, but there are people who wouldn't have been able to do that, or who would have been like, your job is to help the family. So the fact that they're still making sure that she has a little bit of, change here and there, that's good. With Christmas Day approaching, I decided I would send my mom and siblings some tasty treats as gifts. Lillian had the best popcorn ball recipe and added plain M&Ms to it, only made them better. Lillian helped me get the large round tin ready for mailing. Do you think they'll like them? Of course, and I think they'll be really surprised. Aside from my annual secret birthday phone call from my mom, we did not stay in touch. Cult members were forbidden from having contact with any family members outside the cult. That thought made me sad, but I tried to hide my emotions from Lillian since I knew she'd lecture me about not being grateful. Suddenly, the brown paper bag that Lillian was using to wrap the metal tin fell to the floor. She pushed back her chair and said, "Come with me." I got up and followed dutifully behind her as we headed toward her and Mark's bedroom. She opened the double doors of her closet, knelt down in front of it, and began rummaging through bags of clothing boxes and assorted items. What are we looking for? Or what are you looking for? I couldn't imagine what would be so critical that she stopped in the middle of the task. That didn't seem like Lillian. She ignored me and kept digging. Finally, she located a flat gray box. "Sit down. I want to show you something." I sat across from her on the floor, my back leaning up against their bed. Lillian lifted the lid off the box and took out a leather-bound book that was stuffed with papers. "What is all of that?" "It's stuff from Dad, letters, his sermons, and other writings." She leafed through a few pages until she found what she'd been looking for. Her lips moved ever so slightly as she silently read something handwritten on a yellowish sheet of paper. She wiped away a tear before she thrust the letter at me. The letter was addressed to Mark, written by my dad while he was in prison. I stared at my dad's handwriting and silently read the letter. This time I couldn't hide my emotions. Oh boy. Oh boy. My father had promised me in marriage to Mark. I was not expecting that. Aren't they Christians? Are they still going by this? Is Mark thinking he's going to get... What? No wonder this letter brought tears to Lillian's eyes. I felt my own tears begin to flow, but for far different reasons. Dad knew me. He actually knew my name. In the letter, he used my first and middle name, Anna Keturah. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Keturah, even though my middle name was spelled incorrectly. This proved to me that my dad didn't just know of me, the 10th child of his fourth wife, but he actually knew me. Okay, if you say so. Thankfully, the meaning and intent of the letter had no influence or consequence in our lives. Whew. Whew. I couldn't have cared less that I'd been promised to Mark. After all, my dad was dead, and that practice of polygamy was no longer significant in our lives. Mark and Lillian had both professed their faith in Jesus Christ. As Christian believers, they would never even entertain the idea of polygamy. Prior to their conversion to Christianity, however, they both encountered pressure to participate in polygamy but had resisted. Finding my one true love was my plan, too, and I believed I had already found him. My relationship with David from school was definitely secretive, much like Kathleen and Jim's had been. I shared many details about my family's background with David and considered him one of my confidants. Still, I was afraid that if Mark and Lillian knew about us, they would consider my behavior out of control and send me packing to Denver. I sighed as I reread Dad's letter, then clutched it to my chest. Why are you showing this to me now? I'm not sure. Getting the gift ready for your mom got me thinking about our lives up to now. I've thought about letting you see this a dozen times. I just never found the right time. Do you mind if I keep this? Sure. Lillian made a distasteful face. What? You don't want me to have it? It's not that. I just don't know why you would want it. It's basically your father pawning you off to someone who's already married in exchange for their monetary support and faithful obedience. Everything when it came to these girls was about gain. Gain for whatever man needed whatever money, which is why they often promised their girls off to these pervs and whomever else. And it's sad. I understand, I nodded, then lowered my gaze once again to the letter in my lap. But this is the only proof I have that Dad knew who I was. I know he wasn't a good man. Lillian let out a sudden puff of air through her lips and tried to smile at me. I just think this shows that buried deep inside of him, underneath the madness of his mind, in his heart of hearts, he must have loved all his kids. However messed up his expression of that was, he still loved us. I wanted so badly to believe that about him. Yeah, you grasping for straws there. I don't think he really knew them. I don't think he really loved them. I think it was just a number in what he thought was his kingdom. The following year, Celia fled Denver and the cult and came to live in Houston with our sister Kathleen and her husband Jim. Spring Branch Church of God Academy accommodated her challenging work schedule and allowed her to complete the final courses she needed for a diploma. Celia had always been an honor student, sometimes in the top 10% of her class. When she left the cult, she was determined not to settle for a GED. Good for her. Not knocking GEDs, but good for her that she knew what she wanted. Celia and I graduated together in May of 1987. After I crossed the stage clutching my high school diploma, Mark pulled me into a bear hug. This man, whose father-in-law had offered me to him as his second wife, had stayed faithful to Lillian and had chosen to act like a father figure to me the entire time I lived with them. That warm embrace encapsulated his gentle fathering as he whispered words I still can hear today. I am so proud of you. And we're going to end it right there. Oh, y'all, these are this is such a good book. She's done such a phenomenal job. I got to remember to do that one little trigger warning because I wasn't expecting for Lillian's brother to commit suicide. I hate that happened. I hate that they couldn't get a handle on his mental illness, and it's unfortunate. I'm interested to see what happens next As I said earlier, please like the video as it helps the channel. Until next time.